Hello, everyone. My name is Rachel Stroley. I am the Teen Services Coordinator at Glenside Public Library District in Glendale Heights. I also write about books for BuzzFeed, and I'm so excited to be here today. Thank you all so much for joining us for the September Teen Book Club brought to you by Sourcebooks and Baker and Taylor. I am so thrilled to be here with Marieke Nijkamp, the author of This Is Where It Ends, who is joining us from the Netherlands. Before we start our discussion, I do have a few housekeeping items to make sure that you're aware of. So first, at the end of today's event, we will be picking 3 lucky participants to win a YA prize pack to thank you all for registering and attending. We also encourage you to submit your questions for Marieke through the Google form link provided in the chat. We're doing questions this way rather than through Zoom directly as a part of our event security. Thank you for understanding that. So that being said, enter your questions and comments into that Google form at the link provided. We'll make sure we get as many of those in as possible. So I'm just going to introduce you a little bit to Marieke. She is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of This Is Where It Ends, Before I Let Go, and Even If We Break. In addition, she is the editor of the YA anthology Unbroken, 13 stories starring disabled teens, and is the author of the amazing DC graphic novel, The Oracle Code, following a young Barbara Gordon. She is a storyteller, dreamer, globetrotter, and geek, holds degrees in philosophy, history, and medieval studies, has served as an executive member of We Need Diverse Books, and is the founder of Diversify YA. It looks great. I don't know how to say it in the...
Fine.
Yeah, it's okay. It works in print, which is how most people are going to see it. So, hello, Marieke. It's so great to see you.
So lovely to see you.
So we are talking about This Is Where It Ends for the most part today. So I know it's been a while, but what was the sort of initial inspiration for this book?
Oh wow, it's been so long. I mean, it felt like so long ago prior to this year, and now it feels like an actual era ago. Goodness, the inspiration for This Is Where It Ends was primarily my going to lunch with a friend the first time I was in the US, which is a while ago. And we went, I don't even know where we went to lunch, but we at some point along the way passed a school bus. And that got us started on a conversation about like differences in school culture, high school culture between like the US and the Netherlands. Because I had never seen a school bus in real life before. I'd seen them in movies. So it was this, oh wow, they really do exist moment for me. Because I'm Dutch, like true to form, we all bike to school. I had friends who would bike to school even if it took like an hour. So yeah,
All right.
That was pretty much her reaction too. So we had this interesting conversation about like differences between growing up in the Netherlands and growing up in the US, going to school in both countries, and obviously also about like security, school shootings. This was shortly after Sandy Hook, so it was clearly on both of our minds, and that's sort of what got me thinking about what it would be like to be in a situation like that, what it would feel like to basically have that moment from like within a few minutes where your entire life upends and changes, and how to deal with that. So that's where the story started for me, and that's where I started thinking about the various characters, and yeah, that's how I started writing contemporary fiction, which I had never done before at that point.
And who would have thought that school buses would truly be the unicorns of the Netherlands?
I know, right?
We love to see it. So since obviously there was a bunch of stuff that's different culturally, what kind of research did you do in order to write a book that was in this setting, in this sort of like different worlds a little bit, and what was that sort of process like?
It was a lot of asking friends to read the book and be like obviously there's a lot of like it kind of feels like writing about a foreign country, but also not particularly, because most of the culture that we get here in terms of like TV and film is American television, American film. So there's, I think most people in the Netherlands and honestly around Europe feel like they pretty much understand the US, at least on some level. It's arguable if they do, if we do. Like you could definitely have discussions about that, and I think that obviously Hollywood isn't the best representation in that sense. But there's just a sense of there's an entrance in. We have a general idea of what high school looks like, what going to high school looks like, what like after school activities might be, what sports look like. So that definitely helped me like form a basic understanding of how I wanted the school in my book to be and what I needed to write that. So beyond that, it was a lot of just asking friends, American friends, like, is this how high school was for you? Like, does this ring true? Does this make sense? Is there anything I need to pay attention to? Is there anything I need to avoid, or anything that is particularly Dutch, that I would just not notice because it's so obvious to me. So that was definitely the fun part of the research. There was obviously also the element of the research that was like, I'm writing about a school shooting, which is a sensitive subject, and it's not something I want to mistreat. It's something I want to do well. So how do I do that? So that was a lot of that was the actual research part, which is just reading nonfiction books about school shootings, watching documentaries, reading investigation reports from school shootings, listening to survivors talk about it, talking to survivors myself, talking to people who went to schools where shootings occurred, and just trying to find a way of approaching it as respectfully and as honestly as possible, and get to a point where I felt like I could at least start to understand what it must have been like, so I could take that and put it into the book.
Absolutely. And so this book is told through multiple perspectives, which is also something that your newest release, Even If We Break, which came out this month. Oh my God,
This month.
What time is right now?
I know, it feels like at least 2 months ago and yesterday, both at the same time.
Yeah, it's oh, I guess it's October in 2 days, so I'm justified in thinking it's almost not September. But so multiple perspectives. But this is where it ends. We've also got texts and tweets and blog posts included throughout. So how do you keep track of all of that while you're writing? Like, is the different voices, is it something that you like write all of one person's experience first? Is it something where you just go sort of in what you think is going to be chronological order for the book? Or even like, was there something that someone had a point of view that ended up not having a point of view because you just realized it didn't work, or someone who initially didn't and then you ended up adding them and it worked out perfectly?
I mean, definitely all of those things happened at some point during the book. Just to start with, in terms of how I kept track of all of it, I wish I kept the file. I wish I'd kept like the printed pages. I'm looking for them and can't find them. I had a massive spreadsheet that basically tracked the main characters, Tyler, various secondary characters on a minute by minute basis, just as a sort of basis for the book, because it's not just having 4 different characters, it's having different characters who are all, aside from Claire and at some point Thomas, they're all in the same like location. So if Autumn does something, it will impact Sylvia, and vice versa. And if secondary characters do something, like both characters will notice at different points in time. So there's just this I needed to have a massive spreadsheet just to stop my brain from just like dribbling out of my ears at some point. So that helped me a lot to keep track of it, and then also sort of fit in the like social media accounts and try to figure out like if a person is tweeting about something, what would they have seen, like how would they have interpreted it, like how does that tiny little timeline evolve along like the major timelines. So that was definitely the thing that helped me most in terms of just like figuring out how the like what the structure of the book should be like and how everything like all the moving pieces interacted. And I think from there it was mainly there were definitely moments where I wrote on just like a point of view basis as opposed to chronological, but I wanted to make sure like I wanted to stick to the different voices. I wanted to make sure that I had a good sense of like how the backstory would weave in as well, because there's obviously flashbacks and everything. So there were moments where I did that. There were also moments when like the tension was so high and so much was happening at the same time that I stuck to chronological writing, because otherwise you end up just going back and forth and deleting stuff and rearranging it, and that's just, I mean, very worth it if it helps the book, but very much not so if it's just your own like lack of organization. So it depended a lot on what the book needed at any given point in time. And I think we definitely went back and forth a bit on like how best to structure the various characters and who to include. And one of the reasons for me to include the various, like the four of them, but also give all of them like an obvious or tentative link to Tyler, was that I wanted to sort of mimic how we talk about school shootings when they occur, because you very rarely get to talk to the perpetrator. You very rarely get to talk to the shooter, because in most cases they go in with the explicit like idea not to come out alive. So we know what happens because we piece together the stories from the people who are there and like the various perspectives they have on it and the perspectives they have on the shooter and their interpretations. And I sort of wanted to mimic that in the book because it felt like the most true to life, as opposed to giving like this one single, this is like the profile of a school shooter, when that's really not as easy as that. So that was also something that was continuously in the back of my mind. Like, if I want to do that, what is the information that the various characters need to have, and what is the information I need to present to the reader? So the spreadsheet was particularly helpful just to keep all of that organized.
Yeah. So obviously this book has been out for 4 years now.
Almost 5. It's ridiculous. It'll be 5 in January.
Wow, what a time.
I know, right? Time is weird.
It's that's just wild. So how has your relationship to the book changed since then, since it first came out? Obviously you spent a lot of time on the bestseller list, which was awesome, and I know you had at least 2 books on there at one point at the same time, which was so cool to see. But so like in the meantime, like how has it changed for you?
It's, I mean, the tricky thing about being a writer is, and this is honestly something I was just talking about to a friend of mine, even just with our most recent books, is that the book you write at any given point in time is hopefully the best book that it can be at that point in time. But also, as you go on to write more books, hopefully you learn from those experiences and develop your crafts and develop your style. And it's interesting going back to old books. I love all of my old books dearly. I love Tiwi for many reasons, for the book itself, but also for all the opportunities it brought me, because readers connected to it so strongly. And that's honestly amazing and humbling both. And it's something I hope I'll never completely take for granted. But it's a very double experience in the sense that like it has such a special part. It's such a special part of my life, and it means a lot to me. But I also look at it like from a craft perspective, and I haven't gone back and read it in a couple of years, I think. I do occasionally go back, especially when I do like school visits and stuff. But that's usually very limited to let me just read a part of the book and not necessarily look at other things. And there are certainly like choices I would have made differently now, but I also try to look at it as I saw a tweet go by at some point, and I really wish I'd bookmarked it or something. But like the gist of it was be kind to the creator you was when you like created the book, the art, the whatever. And that's how I try to look at it too. Like there are things I would do different now, but it's also a book I still love dearly. And it's standing right over there, so that's why I keep looking in that direction. So yeah, I try to look at it as I think it was the best book like I could write 5 years ago, and I'm so ridiculously proud of it.
And then, so jumping from obviously 2016 back to 2020, I do want to sneak in a question here about Even If We Break, because I love it so much. Your editor sent it to me early, and I just devoured it. And it's also the one that I probably see myself the most in, because it's just super geeky, and also like, I don't know how I'd actually react in the situation. So because I'm assuming everyone who's watching has come in because they love This Is Where It Ends. So I want you guys all to know that Even If We Break is available now, and I'm going to have Marieke tell you a little bit about what it's about.
Right, so Even If We Break is also a multi-point of view book. It's about 5 teens who are connected through the role-playing game they play together. And their the friendship has had its ups and downs. But they're all in like a point in time where some of them are going off to college and others are making other life choices. So they have this one last weekend together, and they're going to spend it in a cabin in the woods, which is always a great idea. Like definitely do that. And they're just going to like spend the weekend together, play the game one last time, and then things go wrong. It turns out the friendships they had show some cracks and tears. People and or friendships may break. Murder may happen. I mean, it definitely happens, let's face it. And yeah, it's fun. It's super geeky. It's very much like my version of a cabin in the woods story with a lot of RPG and many queer characters and many disabled main characters too. And it was such a joy to write. And I definitely wouldn't know what I would do in that particular situation either.
My main answer is just I never go to the cabin in the woods. Like,
well,
just
fair.
a hard no.
Fair. That seems like a reasonable life choice under any circumstance.
Yeah. I don't really like the woods, and I don't really want to be in a horror movie, so it just seems logical to stay away.
Yeah.
So you have done obviously like contemporary thrillers. You've got an amazing graphic novel. You've got this incredible anthology. So is there a format of book that you haven't tried yet that you're really hoping to at some point? Or is there one that you like really just want to write a million more of?
I mean, he has so many. The thing I don't particularly care about format so much as I do about story. There are so many stories I want to tell, and like the form they take, and if it's like graphic novel or audience, it's kind of secondary to that. But also, like I said, This Is Where It Ends was my first contemporary book. And before that, I basically grew up in this super geeky, like science fiction, fantasy writing community. Like that's where I got my writing cred as a baby writer. So I would love to go back to especially the more like fantasy side of things, which is definitely also why I snuck in some like fantasy elements, and even if we break, and like the story world where they play the RPG, because it was so fun to just like flex those muscles a tiny little bit. Um, so I'd love to do that. At the same time too, I'm working on my next YA now, which is I think we pitched it as Contagion meets the Society, if I'm not mistaken. It's a group of teens in a residential treatment facility who have to deal with the fact that the world around them is suddenly doing weird shit, and they're on their own, and things happen. And I am having so much fun with it. Like, writing a pandemic book in a pandemic is a choice, but I'm also really like, I love these characters so much, and it's just, I think that more than anything appeals to me, like finding the right characters and finding a story that helps me give answers to questions I have about the world, about like being human, to make it ridiculously like self-important. Um, just like ways in which people and characters can interact with each other and with the world around them, and grow and develop. And like that's what makes writing magical to me, is being able to play with all of that, and the form it takes is definitely secondary.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this really interesting pandemic year, um, I don't know how else to describe it without crying.
I know.
So has there been any really incredible books that you've read, or movies or TV that you've watched that you think was really great, and want more people to know about?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So many. I'm finally starting to get my like reading mojo back again, which is really nice. But um, Crown Chasers is out today, and it's an amazing YA space opera, and I love it so, so much. And it has the snarkiest voice, and it's so perfect for any teen who loves like space and um, family stories and friendship and intrigue and betrayal and snark and amazing AIs. So I love that. I also like, one of the books that I've been pushing on everyone, and I know you'll appreciate this, is Elazzo, by Darcy Little Badger. I like, oh God, I love that book
So
so
good.
much. Love it so much. I've been just like shoving it into people's faces, like at appropriate social distance, obviously, and just like mumbling at them, going like, "You need to read this book. It's so good." So I think those two are definitely ones that come to mind. But my God, 2020 is a ridiculous year, but it's such a great year for books. It's absolutely, absolutely amazing year for books. Also, everyone should read You Should See Me in the Crown, because
Yes.
yeah, Leah Johnson's debut is, it's obnoxious that all of those books are debuts too. And I mean this in the best of ways. Like, God, I love those authors doing amazing work like this. But it's just like, yeah, they're definitely raising the bar for all of us, and I appreciate that so much.
Okay, and I think this is going to be my last question so that we have enough time to do our in advance submitted questions as well as our in the moment submitted questions.
Perfect.
So is there anything that in the last 4 years, like, you have been just waiting for someone to ask you in an interview and no one has yet? Or something that you really like that you've never really get to talk about? Like, if there's some like really specific niche thing that like doesn't even relate to books, but you just like want a chance to talk about it, like you would do a PowerPoint on it if you could. Like if you thought you had like an audience that would listen to you, which I will always listen to a PowerPoint. Like even if I don't know anything, unless it's about like microbiology, in which case no. But like, so is there anything that you haven't been asked, or that you just really wish you had the opportunity to talk about more?
Um, I mean, up until Even If We Break, it was definitely role-playing games, and then I wrote a book about that, so that helps. Um,
You just have to
I would
write the book that you
say,
want to be asked about.
right, yeah, I know. I'd say one of the things, like you mentioned in your introduction, that I majored in medieval studies, and I definitely don't talk about the Middle Ages enough as it is, because the Middle Ages were amazing. Don't listen to any white supremacists who will tell you that it was white and straight and it is like, no, that's definitely not true. It was a fantastic time of um, cultural exchange, and queer people definitely existed in the Middle Ages. Like, trust me, I have the sources, I can point you to them. It was a super interesting time of sort of cultures forming and figuring themselves out, but also doing so, especially in conversation with a broader context and cultures all around the world. And it's anyone who ever mentions the Dark Ages to you is lying, basically. It was not the Dark Ages. It's a super super fascinating time, full of storytelling. And storytelling specifically as a means to make sense of the world around you and sort of build like your own identity and your own cultural identity. Also in times of pandemic and Black Death, as it happens. Um, but like, yeah, there are so many medieval stories that aren't told yet that I'm just waiting to see in fiction and in research as well. My own specialty is like Dutch Middle Ages because for obvious reasons, and storytelling in the Middle Ages because again, stories are amazing. But just knowing like we wouldn't have medicine like in the way like understanding of medicine as we have today without cultural exchange with the Islamic and Jewish worlds. And African kingdoms in the Middle Ages are super interesting, and there needs to be so much more research on that. And I could talk about this for hours on end, but trust me, the Middle Ages are great.
Well, if you ever feel like doing a PowerPoint just for me, I will watch it. And I'm Dutch, so that works extra well for me. So
I will tell you about my master thesis at some point in
yes,
minute detail. I'm sure you'll enjoy that.
you can send me all those sources for queer people in the Middle Ages. I love it. Okay, so we have some pre-submitted questions. I apologize in advance if I butcher the pronunciation of any of the names of your libraries. So readers from the Houghton Lake Public Library in, oh gosh, I should have looked up. There's too many M states. I think it's Michigan. I think it's Michigan. If
Hey,
need,
don't look at me. I mean, I'm
no,
fairly sure it is, but
I'm like looking at my Microsoft Word document, expecting it to like Google it for me. I think it's Michigan.
it's Michigan.
If you
Yeah.
could tell your younger writer self anything, what would it be? And then, do you Google yourself? And so, what's your favorite underappreciated novel? So there's three questions in there.
Okay.
You could tell your younger writer self anything. What would it be? We'll go with that one first.
Definitely just keep writing. And honestly, I don't think my younger self necessarily needed to read that to hear that because I need to be writing to not be a terrible person. I get super grumpy when I like don't write for extended periods of time. It's very much my way of interacting with the world. But like my younger self dreamt of becoming a published author, and I'd go back to them and tell them that like, yeah, just don't give up. It'll happen. So that's one.
Do you
I
Google yourself?
Yes, I shouldn't, but I do. Um, I will say I mostly use it as a way of like figuring out things that occasionally things like foreign covers that I love translated versions of my books, and I don't necessarily always hear about foreign covers immediately, so I just Google myself and see what pops up, and if nothing interesting pops up, I'm good. I don't read reviews because reviews are a reader space and should remain that way. Um, So I may occasionally when people tag me in reviews, but generally speaking, I try to like leave that space to readers themselves because I feel like encroaching isn't the way to go. So that's not why I Google myself. Um, but yeah, maybe I like, yeah, it's fun. It's terrible, but it's fun.
Okay, and then 3 was what's your favorite underappreciated novel?
Oh my God, that's so hard. Um, I'm just like staring in panic at my bookshelves. Um, I will say, oh my God, there's so many books that I love that everyone should read. Um, yeah, nope, that one isn't out yet, so I can't talk. Oh man, it's so hard to remember like which books are out when.
Yes.
Like, yeah, there are books that I want to talk about where I'm like, no one has talked about this book in a while yet, and then I realize it's not out until 2020, 2021, so that makes sense.
I
I will
feel like
say, hmm?
we could talk about any of Dahlia Adler's books, honestly.
Yes.
Because I know you love Dahlia as much as I do.
I love Dahlia to bits, and everyone needs to read Cool for the Summer when it comes out because it is amazing. It is the
Oh, yeah.
biased book you'll ever read, and it's so good. Um, and also read Under the Lights specifically because I love Under the Lights so much. Like read all of Dahlia's books, please do that. But specifically, I love Under the Lights so much. I also love Just Visiting a lot. Um, yeah, like I'm not anticipating her books to be underappreciated again anytime soon once Cool for
Yeah.
the Summer hits because it's amazing
Yes.
and it's going to be a summer hit, which rightfully so. Um, so yeah, that's thank you for that prompt. That's a
You're
very,
welcome.
very, very good one. Yes.
I don't always know where everyone's book sections lie, but I know for a fact that you and I both love Dahlia. So
Yes. Yes. I can also easily fill an entire hour with just talking about how much I love Dahlia and her books. So tune in for that at some point too.
yes. Okay, so the next one we've got the Palm Beach I'm assuming that's County Library in Florida, wants to know, have you been invited to schools to talk about school shootings? And if so, what kind of questions did the students ask?
I have, but definitely like in relation to the book. Not necessarily as an expert on school shootings because I definitely am not. I've done a lot of research, but I've done it specifically in this context, so I wouldn't feel comfortable talking about it any as any sort of like advice giving type person. But I've certainly talked about it with students. Questions that come up depend a lot on if they have experienced shootings in either their like either personally or in their school, in their neighborhoods, through family. Um, Usually those aren't so much questions as just opportunities to talk about it and like have a hopefully safe space where they can talk about their fears and their worries and hurts, which is also something that happens in my emails a lot. And I mainly try to be a person who listens and like is there and acknowledges their pain or their fear or whatever it is because I think that's important. And beyond that, so the question I get asked most is definitely why they happen and what to do about that. Um, which, you know, if there was an easy answer to the first, I would give it. I don't think there necessarily is one. What to do about it is definitely just, you know, gun laws, generally speaking. Um, which is to say that's definitely one of the parts that one of the elements that helps most, just based on the research that's out there in various different countries. So that's usually one of the things we talk about. And I try to talk about it in a way that allows students to form their own opinions as well, because I feel awkward being this like outsider coming in to tell you how to live your life, which is not a thing I want to do. But I think it's helpful to approach, especially like teenage students, in a manner of trying to help them shape their own opinions. And whether that's something I agree with or not is secondary to that. Like, as long as your opinions are based in you know how to base them in fact, you know how to deal with the evidence that's there. I think that's a far more important skill to have than necessarily talking about what's the wrong or right way to approach this specific topic. There are definitely wrong and right ways in certain topics, but this is one that's more complicated, and that's okay too, as long as you have like the wherewithal to be able to talk about it in a way that acknowledges the difficulties and the facts and the emotions and all of the various influences there.
And this next question sort of ties into something you just were talking about. Okay, I'm definitely not going to say this one right. The Ossining, that's what we're going to go with. Ossining
Yep,
Public Library in New York asks, did your position on gun laws affect the narrative of the book?
Probably yes. I feel like it would be naive to say it didn't, because I have a very clear position on gun laws. I will say, like, that lunch meeting that inspired the book was with a friend who is very passionately against any form of gun laws. And we had a strong discussion about that, because I come from a country where gun possession is not a thing. I don't think I know anyone who owns guns recreationally or otherwise. I've been to gun ranges and I have fired guns just to get a sense of what does it feel like to have a gun in your hands, basically. But it's just not a thing here. And that isn't to say school shootings don't happen, but it is to say we've had 2 in the history of our country. And 1 person died. And I think that's an important consideration. And that certainly isn't just due to population size or size of the country or anything else. It is due to what you have available if you're in a situation where you wish to do harm. And this ordinance isn't about gun restrictions or gun laws or anything like that. And I did purposefully keep it away from that narrative, because it's about those 54 minutes where basically the character's world is upended. And that was the story I wanted to tell. But like I said, I'd be naive in thinking that my own position on gun laws wouldn't seep into it in some way, just like everyone's worldview always colors the choices we make in books and in art. And yeah, it is also something I talk about, talk with to students, and it's interesting to see. It's something that I can't wrap my mind around. Just because like I do not have that cultural experience. I do have a lot of research that says restrictive access to guns helps prevent shootings. And for me, that's very obvious. But I also recognize that it is far more complicated than that, because it's not just about the shootings. It's also about, for a lot of people, a way of life, a way of providing for themselves, especially in rural areas. It's about protection. It's about far more than that. But it's not something that I can wrap my mind around. And the best I can do is try to keep an open mind when people talk to me.
Okay, so I am jumping over to our audience questions that we've gotten today. So the first one is from M, who asks, what inspired you to create the character of Tyler, and why was he abandoned by everyone?
That was honestly I wanted to write a character who best fit what we have in terms of profile, like the profile of a school shooter. And generally speaking, it is the angry white boy who is struggling with his place in the world and is emotionally lashing out at or is abandoned by a lot of people. Um, and that isn't to say that people who are emotionally struggling or are abandoned will immediately turn to violence. And that was something that was important for me to include in the book too. Like many kids who grow up with trauma in their lives or in their families won't turn to violence. But for Tyler, it's part of who he is and why he made the choices he made. And that was, in this case, it wasn't so much inspired to create the character as it was a matter of trying to figure out like what fits the profile and understanding that like we've amassed, that science has amassed, that law enforcement has amassed over like many years of many school shootings.
All right, we've got this one from Valerie. Of all of the characters that you've ever written, so I think this is any of your books, which
No.
character do you feel the closest to?
Oh God, that's so hard. Wow, that's so complicated. That's such a hard question. I think it depends a bit on the day. Um, the thing is, with all of the characters I write, like when I create a character, my starting point is always like a point of connection to the character, whether it's like a hobby or a particular way of looking at the world, or like in Ever's case, and even if we break, like being non-binary and my being non-binary too, so having that particular connection, I'm always looking for a point of entrance, like entryway into the character, so I can try to have a starting point and then continue to build and create and make them their own like unique person. So I definitely feel connected to all of them in one way or another. Um, I think, oh man, I'd say at this point, probably Ever in Even If We Break, because they were the first non-binary character I wrote in a full-length novel, and that just felt very special to me. It's also obviously the book that's most on my mind at the moment because it just came out, so I have this more direct connection there. Um, so yeah, Ever or maybe Maddie, because Maddie was the first actually autistic character I wrote in a novel, and also was super important to me for that particular reason. So yeah, one of those two probably.
All right, we get this one from Pam. So what were you doing professionally before you wrote This Is Where It Ends? And can you tell us about the process of getting published?
Oh God, what was I doing professionally? um, I, well, actually, I was working in local government and mainly focusing on the process of structuring budget cuts, which is, fun for the whole family. Um,
For Ben Wyatt, we'd love to see it. I don't know if you watched Parks and Rec, but
I honestly I loved working in government. I really did enjoy it. It's complicated in many ways, but I was lucky enough to be in a few positions where I had really cool coworkers, and it's nice to do something that feels like in a positive way feels like being part of a community and hopefully creating a stronger local community. Um, so that was what I was doing, and most of my writing happened in like the late hours of the night and weekends and my days off. And it certainly helps to live in the Netherlands and have quite a few vacation days. So that was mostly where all my writing happened. And the process of getting published took a while. I wrote my first book with the intent of being published when I was 11. It wasn't a book. I did send it to a publisher. It was like, I mean, it felt like a book to me at the time, but looking back on it, it should have had at least like maybe 200 pages more. But I've been working on like figuring out how to be published in like all the years since. But for me, it really started when I started writing in English, which was during college, and it was very much a traditional route of writing a query letter and sending it to agents, and then getting rejected a lot. And then getting rejected more and writing another manuscript and sending that to agents and getting rejected even more. So it's basically just this process of like writing those 10,000 words that you're supposed to be writing before they become good words. I don't know if I necessarily believe that, but it was definitely helpful in just like do it, like having the experience of writing books and reading other people's books and learning from that and critiquing manuscripts and having other people critique my manuscripts and getting rejected more until This Is Where It Ends happened, and I sent that off to agents and found myself with multiple offers of representation and picked my amazing agent, Jen Allen, who is still my agent now, which is supposedly a bit rare, but she's fantastic. So I'm really, really happy with that. And she sent it out on submission to editors and publishers, and that's when Sourcebooks said, hey, we have a vision for this book, and we talked about it, shared that vision, and magically a book happened. It was still a process of several years, but that's the short version of it.
Okay, and I think we've got time for about 2 more questions, which are the ones that I have here. So first, we have this one from Diana, which says, at the end of the book, someone asks about the shooting. How could it happen here? Why couldn't we stop it? How would you answer those questions?
Oh, wow. I mean, if I had an answer to that second question, I think a lot of people want to hear it, and I would love to have that answer. I think the answer to the first question is like, why did it happen here? Is because it could happen anywhere. There's no, like, school shootings don't just occur in like certain postcode areas or like cities versus rural areas or anything like that. They can and do happen anywhere. And I don't think there's necessarily an easy way of explaining why things happen in a specific location at a specific time to specific people. I think that's an almost philosophical slash religious question. As for why couldn't we stop it? Yeah, I would love to have an answer to that. I think in my perspective, it's a combination of many things. It is gun laws. It's also toxic masculinity, and I think that's such an important part of violence and violent acts and mass shootings in general. So I think one of maybe one small thing is allowing boys to identify with like the whole spectrum of humanity and all genders, and learning to embrace their emotions, teaching them ways to healthily cope with those emotions, showing them that it's okay to be angry and sad and cry and struggle. And I don't think that's a complete answer or a complete solution or anything like it. But it is something I notice in my research, in the fact that it's mostly white boys who feel like the world should be at their feet, and when it isn't, that they can't deal with it. Like, I feel like that's something far beyond the scope of this book, but that's something we should deal with, societally speaking, not just in the US, but in the Netherlands too, because it is unhealthy and it's not a good way to grow up, and it is a danger to most people of different genders as well. So yeah, maybe that's a small aspect of it.
Okay, switching gears a little bit from that.
Something happier. I know I wrote this book, but you know.
I planned the order of these last two questions on purpose.
Thank you.
So we've got Marianne, who is asking, what is one of your proudest moments as an author?
My proudest moments as an author are getting emails are getting emails from readers who say the book meant something to them in a particular point of their lives. When it comes to this word, and specifically, I have definitely got emails from readers who told me that it helped them mourn and grieve people they've lost in school shootings, which is intensely humbling. Also gotten reactions of readers to, most recently, Even If We Break, who tell me that Finn, the main character, is the first character they've ever seen with EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, hypermobility. For those who saw my cool rings, it's also what I have, but it's a chronic illness, and that it helped them maybe understand themselves a little bit better. I think finding those like small moments of connection are easily the best thing about this. It doesn't really feel like a job. I mean, it is, but this weird thing of creating stories and lobbing them out into the world and seeing that someone on the other side picks it up and you know, it helps them find a part of themselves, or it helps them like deal with something in their lives, or it helps them maybe create their own stories and pass those on. That's definitely the best feeling.
So sweet. I assumed you were going to say meeting me in person, but it's fine.
I mean, also that, yes, close second, Rachel. Very close second.
I promise I'm not actually an egomaniac. I just see an opportunity for a joke and I take it. Okay.
As you should.
So, thank you so much to everyone who participated in our book club today. Sourcebooks has listed the winners in the chat. So if you are a winner, please email the queen of my heart, Lucy Lewandowski, to claim your prize. Her email is in the chat box, so make sure you grab that. And Marieke, it was so wonderful chatting with you.
You too.
Thank you so much to everyone who joined us. Make sure you tune in next month, Tuesday, October 27th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that one will be with Kate Moore, who is going to discuss her New York Times bestseller, The Radium Girls, as well as the recently published Young Readers edition of The Radium Girls. Sourcebooks is going to add a link in the chat, so you'll be able to sign up right now so you don't forget, because I would definitely forget, because that's just how my brain works. And so you'll also get an email as a follow-up, as a reminder. So I'm just gonna keep talking until I see that link pop up in chat.
Meanwhile, let me just quickly show off. Hey,
yes.
If you want to buy my newest book, Even If We Break, is out now, and it's super creepy, but in a good way.
It is. That's very true. It's so good. Oh, look, there is the link. So there you go. Sign up to hear Kate Moore talk about the Radium Girls in October. And I hope all of you have a great, wonderful rest of your days. Wash your hands and wear your face masks.